Right, hello everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Today we've got our next webinar in our series of practical autism. Today's webinar is called How to Support My Child's Challenging Behaviour. Julia is going to do a presentation for us. Now, Julia is the clinical director of the Sunflower Autism Consultancy, and she's a specialist autism consultant with a wealth of experience working with children on the autism spectrum in mainstream schools, special needs schools, supported living facilities, as well as supporting children and families at home. She holds a master's in autism studies from the University of Kent Tizard Centre, and her specialist areas include supporting children and their families with challenging behaviour and supporting children to overcome difficulties with communication. So let me bring Julia in. Julia, are you there?
Hello.
Hi. So, Julia, welcome to our webinar, and thank you for joining us today. So, Julia is going to she's going to tell us a little bit quickly about what it is that she does, about her consultancy, and then she's going to go straight into the presentation. And afterwards, we're going to do Q&A. So, people feel free to ask questions in the comments and and we'll try and work them into the questions at the end. So, Julia, I'm going to hand over to you. So just fire away.
Thank you very much. Right. Okay, thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. So yes, first of all, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about myself and Sunflower Autism Consultancy. So we do two main things. The first thing is that we actually do autism diagnosis assessments. I work alongside a psychologist, so it's a multidisciplinary team. And we also give parents, families with children with autism, behavioural advice, behavioural support. We support with daily living skills, academics. We also work with young people, teenagers and adults as well directly, giving general advice and support about autism as well, and specifically behavioural support. So here is all our contact details. You know, you can get in touch. Please feel free to get in touch if you would like some support, if you're struggling, especially at the moment during the lockdown. You know, it's very difficult times. So all the contact details are available both on our Facebook page and on the website. And on the website, there's a little bit more information as well. And on both those places, there's also some lovely parent reviews. So please feel free to have a look. And like I say, get in touch. Don't hesitate, please, if you need any behavioural support. Okay, so we're going to get straight into it now. So today we're going to be discussing what actually is challenging behaviour. We're going to look at why does challenging behaviour occur? And then very importantly, how can you find out why is your child displaying challenging behaviour? And then I'm going to be giving you some practical strategies that you can actually use at home with your child to help manage the challenging behaviour. And then I'm going to do a couple of frequently asked questions at the end. And then, of course, it'll be over to you to ask me some questions as well. I just want to point out quickly that this is a very condensed version of my normal workshop, which is usually a full day parent workshop, six-hour workshop. So I've had to condense it into little half-an-hour slots. So I apologise if I don't cover everything, but I've tried my best to cover the things I think you'll really want to hear about. And there's always the question and answers at the end, so you can feel free to ask anything that doesn't come up. Okay, so let's get going into the nitty-gritty. So we probably hear this term quite often, challenging behaviour, when we talk about children, when we talk about specifically children that have autism or additional needs or learning disabilities. So what actually do we mean when we say challenging behaviour? Well, I've taken this widely used definition by Eric Emerson, who is a fantastic professional in the field of learning disability. And he said in his book, which is called Challenging Behaviour, which you can actually buy, which I do recommend. He's not a friend or anything, but it's a really good book. And he actually says that challenging behaviour is behaviour of such intensity, frequency or duration that the physical safety of that person or others is placed in serious jeopardy, or behaviour which is likely to seriously limit or deny access to the use of ordinary community facilities. Now that's a lot of words, so let's dissect that a little bit more closely. What on earth is he saying? So the first part is probably the part that most people are familiar with. Behaviour of that's very intense, very frequent, and it happens very often. And it's often actually what it does is it's the physical safety of that person or others that's in jeopardy. So it's quite serious, challenging behaviour. Things like the physical violence towards others, self-harming, unfortunately, can be one. Destructive behaviours, throwing, breaking things. And then there's other behaviours that we come across, such as spitting, smearing feces, these types of bolting, these types of challenging behaviours, which clearly are very, very challenging to have to manage when your child emits these types of behaviours. So that's probably the better known side of challenging behaviour. But if we actually look at the second part of that definition by Emerson, it's very interesting to see he also talks about probably a lesser known side of challenging behaviour, which is behaviour which is likely to seriously limit or deny access to the use of ordinary community facilities. And this is massively important for people with autism and or learning disabilities, accessing the ordinary community like everybody else can. So things like being able to sit still in a classroom and access their education, that's can be really difficult for some of our children with autism. Following instructions, performing daily living skills, those types of independent skills that we all kind of learn quite naturally and innately as we get older. For children with autism, those can be really difficult. Unable to concentrate for long periods of time. And of course, those difficulties with social skills and communication, which is a large part of the diagnosis of autism. So all these things may not be obvious challenging behaviours, but they're actually affecting people's lives. And so they're the types of things that I also support people with autism with. And I've just put this quote here because I really like this. This is from Peter McGill, who teaches at the Tizard Centre. He's also been a professional in the field for a long time. He actually taught myself. He's a bit of a legend in the field. And I just thought he really grasped it well when he talked about this. So he said that most children, without just typical children, as we might refer to them, they do display lots of challenging behaviour in their terrible twos, or the three-nager years, as I'm currently experiencing myself. I can definitely testify to that. So lots of typical children do have these behaviours, but the difference is they grow out of them. They start to develop communication, social skills, which enable them to get the things that they want more easily. But children who have autism or learning disabilities, they don't develop these skills due to the diagnosis and the additional needs that they have because of that. And so that leaves them with the same needs that need to be met, but unfortunately they can't communicate to get those met. So how do they communicate to get those needs met? Through challenging behaviour. And as he says at the bottom there, many challenging behaviours are effective ways for a person with learning disability to also control what's going on around them. Very often people with autism don't have a lot of control over their daily lives. Actually, we kind of control things that they do, like all children, because of course we know we're their parents and we have to teach them. But if you're not able to communicate, or if you have a deficit with your social skills and you can't always say what you want to communicate to people, you don't end up having a lot of control sometimes. And so challenging behaviour, unfortunately, is a very effective way to get that attention and to have that control around you. And so sometimes I do, speak to my parents that I work with, my families, about changing a little bit the way that we think about challenging behaviour. And even with typical children, you do hear phrases like, they're trying to manipulate me, that they're naughty, they're bad, it's bad behaviour. I really don't like those types of phrases because, especially with children with autism, it's because of their additional needs, it's because of their diagnosis. But not only that, it's happening for a reason. And that's a really, really important thing to know. And not everybody knows that. And I only know this because I study behaviour, as a passion and as a living. All behaviour happens for a reason. It has a function. It functions in some way for that person. And it also happens, if it's happening frequently, it's because it's being reinforced in some way. And in a little while, we're going to look at reinforcement and exactly what that is. So, as I said here on this slide at the end, the best way to decrease challenging behaviour, and therefore to support our child, is to find out what is the function of the behaviour. Why is it happening, essentially? And then we know which strategies we can use to try to decrease that negative behaviour and then also increase the positive behaviour or the appropriate behaviour that we do want to see. So it's really, really important to know that all behaviour happens for a reason, and there's a function behind that behaviour. Excuse me. So there are 4 functions of behaviour, and you might think that can't be right, but there must be hundreds or thousands of functions of behaviour. And this is for everyone. This isn't just for people or children with autism. All behaviour, there's 4 functions. Sometimes it's a dual function, so it's more than one, but it's always can be put into one of these 4 categories. And what that does is that helps us to narrow down and find out actually why is this behaviour happening, and therefore then we know which function-based intervention or strategy we can put in place to help our child. So those 4 functions are access, escape, attention, and sensory. And I don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, to go into these in a lot of detail, but I will briefly say that, this isn't a negative thing at all. Again, we do hear things sometimes a little bit like, attention-seeking behaviour. Oh, that child just wants my attention. And, I'm probably guilty of saying these things myself, so no judgment at all. But it's actually not a negative thing. We all need to access things that we like. We all want to be able to pour ourselves a glass of wine in an evening, or watch the film we want to watch, or go somewhere we want to go. We all want to sometimes escape things or places that we don't, or people even, that we don't want to be with, except we're going to do these things in a more socially appropriate way. Or, excuse me, sorry, I'm terribly sorry, I must leave. Or excuse me, yes, I forgot, I've got something in the oven. Rather than lying on the floor and screaming, or any of the other behaviours that we've talked about. Attention, again, this isn't a negative thing that people with autism want to gain our attention. Of course they do, especially our children. It's just that perhaps they don't know how to do that in an appropriate way. So we need to try to teach them to do that. So we need to teach alternative behaviours. And sensory, this is an interesting one, and I could go on about this for hours, but unfortunately I don't have the time. Sensory behaviours are essentially behaviours that feel nice. You're getting what we call a nice sensory feedback. And what that means is, and again, we all have these types of behaviours. So, twiddling our hair, tapping our foot, biting our nails, the behaviours that we do just because we like the way those things feel. But actually, in my experience, a lot of the behaviours that autistic children display, sometimes, very, very occasionally, they are purely sensory. But more often than not, there's a behavioural element to them. And actually, it's because they want to access something or escape something or get your attention, as well as perhaps there is some sensory feedback involved as well. But that's something that, is probably for another time. So we know what challenging behaviour is. We now know why it occurs. It occurs for a reason. How can we find out, very importantly, probably why you're here, how can you find out why your child is displaying challenging behaviour? Very important. Well, we do this using an ABC chart. You may or may not have heard of these. Essentially, it's an important way to track behaviour. So essentially, we have a table, I'm going to show you in a moment, and when you write down every single time a challenging behaviour occurs during, say, for example, a week or two, and that's what, your baseline of behaviours that you're taking. What that helps you to do is to track that behaviour and to find the function, find out why is it happening. And so again, therefore, which strategies are going to be effective. Also, a lot of the parents I work with say they find it very helpful because, first of all, those behaviours, especially when you're tired, especially at the moment with lockdown, and you're tired, all these behaviours tend to kind of roll into one and you forget, or when did that happen, or why did that happen? And it's easy just to think, oh, they just happen for no reason. Well, now you know they do happen for a reason. But it's also easy just to think, oh, yes, I can't quite remember why. But actually, if you write it down, sort of not too long afterwards, you go back and think, actually, very often it happens each time, for example, before lunch, and a bigger snack, because actually he's getting, he's hungry. Sometimes it can be simple things like that, where we haven't got practical things that we haven't thought about. And so it helps us to find patterns in the behaviour. Okay, so here is an example of an ABC. And what the ABC stands for is antecedent, behaviour, and consequence. Antecedent is just basically a big long word to say what happened just before the behaviour. And often, not always, but often, these are a similar range of things that people come to me with. So often it's telling your child no, it's transitioning from activities or places, it's giving an instruction, It could be being in close proximity to a sibling. And of course, there's a few others, but they're some of the quite frequent ones that we see. B is for behaviour, so that's where you're going to write down the behaviour that happens. And C is for the consequence. Now, that is, what did you do? How did you respond to the behaviour? And the example there, did you give them space to calm down, perhaps in their room once it was safe to do so? That might be an example of how you manage the behaviour. Another reason this is so important to find out why the behaviour is happening is because we know that behaviour is shaped by both the antecedent and the consequence. So it's kind of like a two-pronged attack. The behaviour is happening because of both what's happening just before it and what happens just after it. So taking the data on the ABC is really important to help you find the patterns. It's also, a lot of the families I work with say to me, it does help them to take a bit of a step back and think a little bit more clinically almost and scientifically, and think, okay, and look at the behaviour in a way that it's not against me, it's not personal, although it's very difficult. I know it does feel like that at the time sometimes, but it allows you to take that step back and just think about it, and therefore think a bit more scientifically almost about how we can decrease the behaviour and which strategies are going to be the right thing to use. If you would like one of these, please feel free to email me, contact me on Facebook, and I will send you a copy. So really find out what is happening. Okay, so now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. This is the practical strategies section, and so here I'm talking about things that real things that you can do at home, and these are things, I might add, that I do both professionally with the children and the people that I work with. These are also strategies that I use on a daily basis with my own young children who are neurotypical, but they're equally effective. Excuse me. So and I talked about reinforcement earlier. I mentioned that word, and that might be a word that you've come across or that you've heard. The most effective strategy in decreasing challenging behaviour and increasing appropriate or positive behaviour that we want to see more of is reinforcement. And I probably use this thousands and thousands of times a day. I cannot say enough because it's so effective. But of course, it does have to be done in a specific way. It needs to be done in an individualised way as well for your child. And the good thing about that is you're the best expert about your child, so you're going to really know how to do this best. So again, what is reinforcement? Well, a quick definition. So reinforcement is something which follows a behaviour, immediately follows a behaviour, which will increase the future chances of that behaviour happening again. So as an example there, you want your child to eat with their fork, so you remind them or you prompt them, okay, use your fork please, and they use their fork, and then you reinforce them both verbally, and you say, oh, great job, thank you so much for using your fork, I love it when you use your fork, oh, I might do a little high five, that's appropriate, reinforcing with your child. And then you might also say, oh, you ate brilliantly with your fork today, so, you can have a bit of ice cream, it's your favourite, it's chocolate. And you're going to reinforce them. Next time they use their to eat, their fall has occurred. You reinforce the behaviour and it increased. And that's the main difference. Some people sometimes ask me what's the difference between a reward and reinforcement. And I said, practically speaking, they are interchangeable words, but reinforcement, the definition is that behaviour will increase. So that's the difference. It's not reinforcement, it is a reward if you give somebody something for doing something well, but if it doesn't increase that behaviour, then it's not reinforcement. Reinforcement hasn't occurred, and that's really what we're looking for. And the best thing about reinforcement, I think, is, well, A, it's really effective in decreasing challenging behaviour, but B, it's great for your relationship and your rapport with your child because it's a positive thing. You become reinforcing. You become a really positive person. It actually helps with, and this is again feedback from a lot of the families I work with, it helps with the rapport. It actually helps with the atmosphere in the home sometimes, and it can also help with other relationships in the house. Well, so it just brings an overall positive impact, which, you can argue with that, it's just great. So here are my top tips on how to use reinforcement. Again, I've had to select 3. I could go on about this forever. Please contact me if you want to know more specifically how to do it. But be specific to the behaviour and the child. So when you're using reinforcement, when I go into schools, for example, sometimes I do hear a lot of like, oh, great job, buddy, oh, good work, oh, good job. That's not really reinforcing. It's very kind of vague, and that might be fine for typical children. That might be enough. But the bottom line is that our children with autism, they need what we call a denser schedule of reinforcement. They need more reinforcement to help them be more motivated. And so be specific. So, oh, great eating with your fork, thank you so much. Again, be specific to the person or the child. So of course, if it's an 18-year-old, you're not going to say, great job using your fork, dude, high five, here's some bubbles. You know, it's going to be age appropriate. It's going to be specific to your child, but also specific to that behavior. Great job really isn't specific enough. So, oh, thank you so much for tidying up. I love it when you tidy up. It really helps me out. Might be a bit more appropriate for an adult or a partner, a husband or a wife. You know, reinforcement works with everyone. Okay, so number 2, reinforce for free often. What do I mean by that? Well, that first point there, the reinforcement was contingent. It was contingent on a behavior, meaning it was dependent on a behavior happening. So they did something good, you reinforce them for it. But what also is really, and this is actually really, really effective, and a lot of my families say that to me, and at first they feel silly doing it and they think that won't work. They think, no, that won't work. And they come back to me and say, do you know what, Julia? That is so effective. That's really helped behavior-wise. Give reinforcement freebies anytime. Anytime your child is displaying a behavior that you want to see, they're walking calmly to the shop, having a great day, don't forget to reinforce them. Oh, you've been so calm today, walking around the shops with me, let's go and get a smoothie together. I want to spend some more time with you because you're being so lovely and calm. Reinforcement, you know, it's nice for everyone. Everyone's reinforced in that situation as well. Great playing with your brother, you've been so gentle and sweet. Thank you so much. Again, maybe a high five, whatever's appropriate for your child. So reinforce for free often. And this one is a very important one, really. Number 3, think about the behavior you want to see. And again, I think this really helps. It definitely helps me as a parent. And I know that a lot of the people I work with helps to kind of reset the way you're thinking. So you might be having a challenging day, you're exhausted, you're on day 3,524 of lockdown, you know, you're tearing your hair out, completely get it. Don't try to think about the behaviors that you don't want to see, because it is easy to kind of fixate on the negative. You know, we're all human beings, we've all been there. But try to reset yourself to think about the positive and think about the behaviors that you do want to see. So instead of, oh, they're always eating with their hands, think about, okay, but actually, what behavior do I want to see? I want to see him using or her using their fork. So I'm going to reinforce their using the fork. Okay, it's really in their room to really push my button, drives me insane, and I've asked them time and time again to tidy it up. But I just, you know, it doesn't do when they're messy. Think about what is it you want to see. You want to see them tidying. So ask them to tidy and then make sure you reinforce them. So always try to, because, and again, as I've said there, you know, nagging is exhausting and negative, and it's just not effective. The most effective thing is actually to use reinforcement. And you might feel a bit silly at the beginning. You might think, oh, that's a bit much doing that all the time, but try it. I assure you it will work. Unless, in very rare cases, I do come across children who don't like that kind of reinforcement. Then there's other ways around it, things like reinforcing by speaking to somebody else, speaking to your partner and saying, oh, isn't so-and-so just doing such a great job today? But that's rare cases. Most children, even children with autism, love reinforcement from their parents. Excuse me. Okay, so that's reinforcement. One other point there, quickly, going back to some of the points we were looking at in the definition about where children were having difficulties in the classroom or going out into public, those types of things. What we tend to do in those situations is break things down into achievable steps and up the reinforcement. So, you know, instead of asking them to sit down and work for an hour, you're going to maybe ask them for literally 2 minutes to start with and reinforce them after that. And then you're going to fade that so that it gets longer and longer. It's just one strategy to help with those types of behaviours that we've already mentioned. Okay, another practical strategy now. And again, you may this is what they think they do or say they do, but actually it's not quite happening. And this is choice making. And this is, again, a really quite a simple strategy, but can be very effective. So giving your child a choice. Remember we talked about the lack of control that people with autism and learning disabilities feel that they have. And actually all children, I think, have, because we kind of we arrange their entire day for them. We tell them what to do. Sometimes we tell them what to wear. Sometimes we tell them where they're going and when. You know, we do have a lot of control over their lives. And again, that's normal with their parents, but that can be difficult. So using choice making can be a great way for them to feel that they're getting some control back over themselves and their lives. And it helps them also sometimes to make decisions. Sometimes people that I work with that have autism, you know, they struggle to make decisions. So this can really help. So sometimes if you say to a child, you know, what do you want for dinner? Blank look, nothing. Whereas if you said, oh, would you like spaghetti or sausages, and maybe even showed them as well, they're going to be more likely to give you a response. So that's just one example to help them with the choice making or the decisions. Some other examples here. So it can be really the smallest little things. Do you want to eat with a big spoon or a little spoon? You know, it's really not a problem what kind of spoon they eat with, as long as they eat with a spoon, right? So you're going to give them the choice, and then when they use the spoon, what are you going to do? Use reinforcement and reinforce that behaviour to increase it. And you could even use them as a visual prompt if they you know, their language is a little bit on the lower end. Do you want to put on your pajamas first or brush your teeth first? Now, again, I obviously wouldn't use this with a child that really likes their routine and is that structure, but with some children, that gives them some control over the bedtime routine, which I know for some parents can be a bit of a hair puller. You're giving them that control. Would you like to wear the red t-shirt or the blue t-shirt today? Again, it doesn't really bother you what t-shirt they wear, but it's just giving them a little bit of control and ownership, actually. Shall we go to the playground or soft play? Actually, activities that you're doing gives them a choice. Obviously, only if you can do both those things. You know, we don't want any false promises. Which book would you like to read at bedtime? These things can be it's a really simple strategy, but it can really help, as I said there at the bottom, to avoid sort of meltdowns and power struggles and arguments that can occur, especially during those difficult kind of bedtime routines or difficult routines that can be a bit stressful. So choice making is a really good one. This one is called the accepting no procedure. And this is exactly what it says on the tin. So this is when a child struggles to accept no. Now, again, you know, in their defense, nobody likes to be told no. If somebody came along and told me I couldn't have that glass of wine tonight, or I couldn't watch my favorite movie, I wouldn't be particularly happy either. So it is understandable, but there are ways around it. One of those ways that's really, really effective is offering an alternative. And this is something that starts to come to you really naturally, actually, as you start to do it. And I just really naturally do it now with my kids. And another tip is try not to use the word no, actually. So I very rarely use no, and that's good for several reasons. One reason is it can be a bit of a trigger, especially children with autism. They can get be a bit sort of triggered on certain words and terms and language. So try to avoid saying no. Also, what that means is that when you do say no, they kind of know you mean business. So, for example, I try to save no for, you know, running into the road, picking up a knife, touching the hot stove, the things that you really don't want them to do. So they know that if you say no, they really, you know, they can't do it. And it also, again, this kind of helps your rapport, actually, because we do sometimes get into a bit of a negative rut where and if you take a step back and listen to yourself, we give a lot of instructions, we say no a lot. And a lot of the parents I work with struggle with this because they think, well, I'm the parent, I have the power, I'm in control, and I do get that. And I'm not telling you how to parent, I'm just telling you strategies that work. And at the end of the day, if the child wants another packet of crisps, do you really have to say no? Obviously, if there's dietary issues, that's a separate issue. But sometimes you do want to say no, of course, and in those circumstances, always offer something else. So a couple of examples there. Child requests for more crisps or more of something, and you know, obviously they can't eat crisps forever. I do get that. So you might say, oh, the crisps. So again, I'm not saying no. I'm saying, oh, the crisps are finished. But would you like a yogurt instead? And that's presuming they like yogurt. So of course, here you do need to be careful to offer something that is reinforcing for them that they do like. So not everybody likes yogurt. Not everybody likes, excuse me, chocolate or whatever it might be. And it needs to be something you have in your cupboard as well. I actually have parents who I work with who sometimes keep specific cupboard with things where they know it is, that not necessarily everyone knows where it is, and they keep it for these moments where they have to say no. And I do actually do that myself. I keep some ice lollies, a store of ice lollies in the freezer for my 3-year-old, because, you know, 3-year-olds notoriously, again, don't particularly like being told no. So what I always do is I try not to say no, unless I really have to, but sometimes I do. So I'll say, okay, listen, we can't have any more of that right now. but there's some ice lollies in the freezer. So I know that that's her favourite thing in the world, so I'm offering an alternative. Another example, okay, so for example, it's raining outside, we can't go to the playground today, but you can watch Toy Story or play with the Play-Doh. Now here, combining both those last strategies, both the choice and the accepting no procedure. And that's again assuming that the child likes Toy Story and Play-Doh. So accepting no, always offer something else. Try not to say no unless it's quite a serious situation. Okay, another one that you may have heard of, you may not, first and then. Some people call it the now and next. There's a few different variations of this. I call it the first and then because I find that easier to remember and also more effective in the language I use. So, first we're going to do this and then you can have that. I also find it quite a natural way to say it. So what it does is it's using reinforcement in a slightly more structured way. You don't have to have the images, the picture there like I've got on the picture. If that works for your child, then absolutely use it and have those two things. What that allows them to know is what's happening, what they're doing, and it also allows them to see, so to always have the reinforcing item as the second. So first, you do the thing you don't really want to do, and then you get the thing that you really want. And again, this is kind of a life lesson. We all go to work and then get paid. You do something, you get something for it, essentially. So it's kind of a life lesson that they're learning. And it's also a really effective way to use reinforcement, either more structured or less structured. You can just say it verbally, again, depending perhaps on your child's understanding or language. Visuals might work best for you. But the bottom line is it's always first we're going to do this, and then you're going to get that. So, first you tidy your toys in the toy box, and then we can go play outside. So also, it doesn't have to be like, first do this, then do that. It can be very natural. First eat your dinner and then you can have your ice lolly. That might be my one that I've stole from myself. First brush your teeth and then we can have a story. So this is a great one for things that have become a bit of a sticking point. A lot of parents come to me and they say, I can't get my child to do this, that or the other. Brush their teeth, put their shoes on, or whatever, tidy their shoes, whatever it is. This is a great way of structuring your reinforcement to specifically have them follow requests, follow your instructions. So, first of all, take off your shoes and your coat, and then we can go and play with your toys. So again, it's letting them know that first they do that, and then they get their reinforcement. And very, very effective, again. Practical strategy. Okay, unfortunately, I haven't got time for too many more practical strategies, but I could go on about them forever. If there's anything I haven't covered, please get in touch. So here's a little bit of general advice on reading the signs, picking your battles. So we all have difficult days, we all have difficult moments, especially at the moment. And for children with autism, it can look more extreme, can't it? And that's where sometimes we get that challenging behaviour and days where you think, I've had nothing but challenging behaviour. So know how and when to pick your battles is really important to try and avoid the meltdowns and the challenging behaviour episodes. So ask yourself sometimes, like I say, is that packet of crisps the end of the world? Again, on a lockdown day, 5,000. Some people see it as this power, struggle, this control situation. It's really not about that. Surely it's about decreasing the challenging behaviour and thinking about behaviour in a slightly different way. So, is it the end of the world if they watch Toy Story again? At the moment, probably not. And if you do want to decrease that, you can go about doing that in a different way at another time. But if it's a difficult day, specifically, especially at the moment, then pick your battles and really prioritise the things that you do want to work on. So maybe even have a list of objectives you want to work on at home. And they're the things that they are the battles you do want to pick, so that you know that you're not going to be necessarily concentrating on some other things. Saying no less is a really, we say it all the time. If you listen to yourself, guarantee you say it more than you think you do. So saying no less, reinforcing more frequently, of course, reinforcement. Can't say that word enough. Don't give too many instructions. Again, that's something that sometimes we don't realise how often we do it. So try to maybe take a step back, especially at the moment. Allow access to preferred activities, toys and foods, of course, and prompt and help with things, even if they can do them independently. If it's a bad day, particularly at the moment, it's okay to prompt them. It's okay to help them. You're not giving in. You're not a bad parent. You shouldn't feel guilty about doing that. You're picking your battles, which every parent has to do, especially a parent with a child with additional needs or challenging behaviour. Be nice to yourself as well. Should be on there, really. Okay, despite all of these strategies, sometimes, of course, challenging behaviour does occur. And again, that's not your fault. But what should you do? And again, this is quite a large topic, so this is a very brief, just touching on it very briefly. I know it's easier said than done, but staying calm and neutral can really help dissolve the situation. You know, if you go up, they go up, you go up, they go up, you go up. It's just that getting back to that power struggle. Nobody's winning. It's just making things unenjoyable. So try to stay calm and neutral. If you need to leave the room, take a deep breath. If it's safe to do so, I advise it. Give your child space physically, as long as it's safe, which can help both them and yourself calm down as well. Afterwards, don't continue to talk about it. A lot of the parents I work with do these, say, oh, yes, but we have to kind of debrief the behaviour. You're just risking another one. I don't recommend doing that. In my experience, not dwelling on it and moving on, and this is with all children, but specifically children with autism, just move on to the next thing. And write it down on your ABC chart so that you can try to figure out how you can work on it in the future. I also recommend not using punishment in terms of taking things away. Time out, I'm going to talk about why in just a moment. If you would like an individual behaviour plan, please do get in touch. I can make a plan for you with the behaviours that you want to work on and strategies to use, specifically for your child. Okay, so very quickly, I'm aware that I'm running a little bit over, sorry about that, but I'm nearly finished, I promise. Just really quickly, a couple of last questions that people quite often ask me about that last point there. So why don't I recommend punishment procedures, as we call them, such as, now when I say punishment, I don't mean corporal punishment or anything like that, I mean things such as taking items away or timeouts. Firstly, simply put, these things do not decrease challenging behaviour. They actually, you're risking increasing it. Most of the time, reinforcement is much more effective. And also, and in all the research, this is the case. It's shown to be a lot more effective. Also, it's not good for your relationship or your rapport. Again, you know, one of the things that people come to me with is, oh, I'd like a bit of a better relationship with my child. Well, you know, taking things, being seen as somebody who takes things away all the time is a little bit negative. So being seen as someone who's reinforcing and not getting into those power struggles, and actually being seen as someone who gives reinforcement often, it's going to help your rapport, and it's going to increase the behaviour you do want to see and decrease the challenging behaviour. Reinforcement is by far much more effective than punishment procedures, such as timeout or taking things away. Some people then say to me, yes, but how will my child learn that they've done something wrong? You know, it's my job as a parent to teach them this. And again, I'm not telling you how to parent at all, but I'm just telling you what the science says and what my experience of 14 years working in the field of autism says. And that is that children with autism, you know, as we know, that their brains are wired differently to ours, and they don't learn in the same way to us. Sometimes you can explain something to them 500 times. They're not going to stop doing it. That's not going to decrease their challenging behaviour. However, they are going to learn, as we talked about, and the behaviour is going to be shaped by both the antecedent and the consequence. So the thing that happens just before the behaviour and the thing that happens after it. So if you're reinforcing positive behaviour, that they are learning, you are teaching them. They're learning through reinforcement, and that's how children with autism learn most effectively. Okay, so that's everything from me. These are all the things we've touched on, and I hope you've learned something and you've really enjoyed it today. So now we're going to go to some questions.
Great stuff. Julia, thank you so much. That was very informative. I've just learned so much. Yes, very good. I'm definitely rewatching this. So yes, we can take audience questions now. If you have any questions, folks, please post them in the comments. We are monitoring them and we can answer them for you. We've got some questions that were submitted beforehand, and I'll read those to you now, Julia.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can unshare your your slide there, that'd be good.
Okay, I'm trying.
That's okay. There we go. There we go. Now we can see you. Our first question is from Nanki Robertson. And she asked, my son is very sensitive to criticism. Whenever we tell him to do something, he'll get very upset and tell us we're scolding him. And then he starts crying and runs away. We don't know how to handle it. Even if we try to explain we're not scolding him, it doesn't help. Do you have any advice for us?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I just missed a really important bit, which I should have heard. When you said, when is it when they're telling him off, or when they're explaining something?
No, when they're just giving him basic instructions.
Okay. So this is one that is quite common, and a lot of people come to me with. And again, I'm going to go back to reinforcement. That's probably going to be my answer for everything, just to warn you in advance. But purely because it's so effective. So people with autism can be very sensitive, and they're very kind of extreme responses sometimes. So one thing that I've found quite effective is a social story. If a child is at that level where they're able to kind of read it. So social story is quite a simple story which can explain a certain topic, and a social story talking about sort of that we all make mistakes, and we all learn from those mistakes, those types of things, explaining that it's if mummy tries to explain something to me, it's not a criticism, it's not telling me off, she's just trying to help me, she's trying to teach me. So social story, as individualized and specific as possible, with pictures of the child and the parents, and examples. If they use maybe as well specific examples of times, if mummy helps you with your maths homework, for example, she's helping you to learn, she's helping you to get better at maths, she's not criticizing you, those types of things. So and people can Google social stories, or feel free to get in touch with me. I make them regularly for people. They can be quite effective for that.
Okay, that's great. That was very, very useful. Our next one is from Mary Hill, and she asks, my 8-year-old boy can fixate on something he wants, like dessert or screen time, even though he knows once we say no, we don't ever go back on it. He'll go on and on about it until he's worked himself up into a full-on meltdown. Do you have any strategies to deal with this?
Yeah, so this is again something quite common that people come to me with. So I talked about the accepting no strategy. Now the issue that you're going to have here is you are going to need what we call a very strong reinforcer to offer as an alternative, and sometimes that can be difficult. So if you're struggling to find that, what I would say is use the first and then strategy. So allow them to access that thing that they want, so that we're not denying it, but we're having them kind of work for it. So first do your homework, and then you can have your ice cream, your ice lolly, whatever it is. First you do your page of maths homework, and then you get to play on your iPad or your Xbox. So you're not denying them the things that they want, but they're working, you're using it to your advantage. Actually, these fixated reinforcers can actually help us out as parents and professionals to use them, to have them do the things that we want to try to kind of get them to do. Homework, brushing teeth, going outside, whatever it is, transitioning into a car, make that the thing that every time they go in the car, they get the iPad, and use it as the reinforcer.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. The next question actually involves siblings. Which I probably have a follow-up question on that later on. But Jessica asks, our 4-year-old is nonverbal. He gets frustrated and lashes out at us or his older sister. Do you have any advice on dealing with this kind of behavior?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, essentially I'll be going back to, hopefully she's watched this and knows a bit more about it now. So I'd go back to my point about finding out why the behavior, because the behavior is happening for a specific reason. We know that. And so it's finding out why. So I would be going back to the ABC. I'd be printing out an ABC, or again, people can contact me to access my one. Writing down every time that lashing out is occurring, writing down exactly what happened just before it and exactly what happened after it. And then you're going to be gauging and looking at some kind of a pattern, first of all, to find out why it's happening. Second of all, if it's happening and this does happen with siblings, again, this is a frequent kind of question. If it just is happening because of the close proximity of the siblings, because obviously siblings are together And presumably if he can't communicate, you said he's non-verbal, so he can't say, you know, go away, I don't want to play with you anymore, or whatever. He's going to kind of use the challenging behaviour to communicate that. One of the strategies that I use, again, reinforcement, of course, but it's kind of having the sibling reinforce the child with autism. So having them doing some structured play together if you can. Obviously it's tricky with some ages, like if it's literally a baby, but having them, even having the baby around when the child is doing their favourite thing. So it can be literally jumping on a trampoline, it can be their favourite puzzle, it could be watching their favourite movie, and it's kind of having them do those activities together. And then even to the point where having the sibling give the child with autism their favourite snacks. It's them that gives them their favourite snack. They give them the sweet. What you're doing there is, when I talked about helping reinforcement, it helps our rapport and our relationships. So we're seen as more as reinforcing and giving nice things to them. We want the sibling to be seen in kind of the same way. So having them doing, giving them their favourite snack, playing their favourite game with them together is going to help. Of course, all siblings, it's never 100%. It is difficult, but you're more likely, if you can do those types of strategies, to have a better rapport there. But in terms of the lashing out towards them as well, definitely take the ABC data to find out why, look at the pattern, and then you can start to see which kind of strategies you're going to need.
Okay, thank you. We've got we're going to the Facebook questions now. Dan Shoker is a teacher at a secondary school, and he asks, if there's an autistic student who's refusing to complete work that perhaps needs to be done, refusal for any number of reasons depending on the child, any thoughts on how I can support them effectively using reinforcement whilst dealing with the rest of the class? I can't offer them something they necessarily want.
That's a great question, Dan. Yeah, and that's something that I go into work with schools and with staff in schools, and this is something that comes up. And of course, it is difficult to manage 30 children, and I don't even know how teachers do it, to be honest. So what you'd want to do again is figure out why is the behaviour happening. Maybe take some data to help you do that. If in most cases it's escape. The function of the behaviour is escape. They want to escape doing the behaviour. You want to be trying to figure out why. Is it because they don't know how to do the work? It's too difficult. Perhaps they need some extra support, sort of out of hours, one-to-one, to help them learn to actually do the work. If it's just refusal because they struggle with concentration and the sitting and doing it, I would break the time down, as I think I mentioned in the presentation, break the time down and make it more achievable, realistic kind of sections of work for them to do, and up the reinforcement. So again, some of the students need more reinforcement than others, particularly students with autism and additional needs. They need more reinforcement. So for a typical student, they might be able to sit there for an hour, do all their work, and then go out for playtime and chat with their friends, and that's reinforcing enough for them. But somebody with autism, they need things broken down into small segments, and they need more reinforcement. So they might only be able to sit down for 10 minutes to start with, and then they need a break to have some reinforcement. That could be going for a quick walk if they're allowed to, get a drink, play on their iPad. And again, I know that can be difficult in classrooms, but it might need to be somewhere slightly away from the others. But often I actually find, if you explain to other students they need some additional help, and that's why they have it, it's that they kind of do actually accept that. You'd be surprised about the whole kind of fairness thing. But yeah, so breaking things down and upping the reinforcement, essentially.
Okay, that's great. Our next question, I think you've dealt with a little bit of this in your presentation before, but I think this might be quite useful when it comes to transitions specifically. Right. Yeah. Gemma Ferguson asks, I have a 4-year-old boy, and when it comes to bedtime, he hates it when we turn off his TV, or we say his bed, he starts shouting, no, no, no. Sometimes he hits, kicks, throws things. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a classic, again, for typical children as well, probably, but specifically children with autism, transitions can be really difficult. So again, yes, as you said, I did touch on this, definitely I'd be using the, obviously, reinforcement, but I'd be specifically using the first and then strategy. And again, this can be tricky, but you need to find something essentially more reinforcing than the thing that you're asking them to stop doing. So in that situation, even if you're using the iPad, and I know that a lot of parents want to try to not use as much screen time as possible, but again, pick your battles. If you're trying to decrease this challenging behaviour and they have an iPad for extra 5-10 minutes, it's worth it, I think. Again, it's up to the parent, but perhaps use the iPad to transition. So, we're going to turn the TV off, but you can watch Paw Patrol on the iPad upstairs for 5 minutes. That's getting them upstairs. So it's all about getting them to the next step. Then you're obviously going to have to get rid of that iPad and get them into bed. If you could try to have something really reinforcing, like, a favourite book that you kind of get them excited about, coming to have cuddles with you, and it's kind of, okay, iPad's finished now, let's go and have the story. So it's not just iPad's finished. Again, it's offering an alternative when you're saying no. So when you're saying no, what also comes under saying no is when something's finished, and that's essentially why transitions are difficult. So okay, so for example, then you manage to get upstairs, and then it might be, okay, iPad or TV is finished, but we can go and read a book together and have a cuddle, but you can have your favorite toy, train, Thomas Train, whatever it is, in your bed with you. So it's never just let's go to bed. It's, okay, this is finished, but we can go and do that. Again, it's offering that alternative to smooth the transition, and then crucially reinforcing the appropriate behaviour when they do it. Oh, thank you so much. You were really calm tonight at bedtime. Made me feel so happy when you did that. Thank you. Reinforcement, reinforcement, reinforcement.
Okay, great. We've got another question, which I'm not sure I understand, but I think you probably can make sense of it. Sasha Tommy asks, good afternoon. What do you do about ESDM for a 3-year-old child? This diagnosis is recent, so I don't know if it's better to go straight to ABA or start with Denver. Does that make sense to you?
I'm trying to think what that stands for.
Yeah.
And I'm drawing a blank, embarrassingly, but I'm presuming it's a diagnosis similar along the lines of autism or some kind of a additional need or learning disability, from the question of ABA in Denver. I mean, ABA in Denver model, so to give some background in case people don't know, so ABA is applied behaviour analysis, which is a type of behavioural therapy. There's lots of different opinions about that. The Denver model is essentially ABA as well. It's very, very similar. It's kind of a more specific model that's been refined in the States, I believe. But it's very similar. They're actually both based on reinforcement, which is what I've been talking about. I would definitely recommend ABA because I have seen, some amazing effects from it. But I would caution, be careful who you go to. Feel free to visit my website and give me a call. But I would definitely suggest, looking for a board certified behaviour analyst or a BCBA, or somebody who at least has, qualifications and experience in the field of ABA, because unfortunately, sometimes it does get a bad rep, and that's because there are some people out there who are not necessarily qualified or doing the best behavioural therapy that they can. So make sure you do your research and to find somebody professional and to find the right fit for you and your family as well. And if you start it, I would say if you start it and you don't get on with the people, don't be disheartened, try somebody else. It's a bit like if you see sort of a therapist or a counsellor or a doctor or any professional, sometimes you don't have a rapport first time, but don't let that put you off the behavioural intervention, because it is very effective. Just make sure you find the right person you feel comfortable with, you and your family.
Great stuff. Well, Julia, thank you so much. This has been an amazing session. I think very, very useful for everybody. So tell us one more time, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So Sunflower Autism Consultancy, you can Google it. We've got a website. There's more information about myself, and there's a contact page. You can contact my phone number. You can contact by email. And also we've got a Facebook page, Sunflower Autism Consultancy, on Facebook and Instagram. Please feel free to get in touch if you need any advice, especially during this difficult time.
Great stuff, Julia. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just going to do the wrap-ups quickly. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Parent Reality, our partners who helps us out. If you want to get in touch with them, you can go to their website on parentreality.co.za. Sorry, give me 1 second. Oops, Daisy. I think I missed that one. Let me try again. There we go. Sorry about that. There we go. And if you have found our webinar useful, please consider contributing on Patreon. Our link is patreon.com/AutistIQ. And remember to join us next time on the 26th of May at 3 p.m. We've got Jane Piddock on supporting siblings, which is going to be very, very interesting. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. That's going to be the end of the webinar today, and see you next time.